A tree that fell onto a century-old power line is what is suspected to have started this fire. Named the Dixie Fire after a road near where it started, fire crews aggressively tried to put it out in the hours after it started. Ignited in the identical area near where the deadly campfire that swept through the Northern California town of Paradise just 3 years earlier sparked too.
Every time you see smoke, people panic, and I get it.
Smoke from the Dixie Fire blossoming into the same horizon survivors of the campfire remember.
Definitely brings back memories, unpleasant memories.
3 weeks and more than 45 miles from where it first sparked, the Dixie Fire created new nightmares, becoming the largest single wildfire in California history while swallowing homes and towns like the historic gold rush town of Greenville. Buildings that stood since the 1800s were gone in hours.
And then once it hit this neighborhood, it was like a cyclone just, had gone through here. And the sky was like all lit up orange, and you could hear everything popping and cracking. You could hear propane tanks exploding.
We have a fire regime now that does not have a historical precedent. The size and the intensity of fires have really changed from what we saw earlier in the 20th century and what we're able to reconstruct using these tree rings and these records about what fire used to be like in the past. At this point, we're fighting the fires of the future because the future's already here.
Years of drought amplify an alarming buildup of fuels. During the last drought between 2012 and 2016, scientists say 150 million trees were killed. The current drought is threatening to kill millions more, adding potential fuel for fires.
Temperatures are higher than they've ever been. The intensity and frequency of the droughts are more severe than we've seen in the historical record, going back thousands of years. The drying of the soils and the frequency of fires is worse than it's ever been. Lots of indications throughout the world that climate's changing.
Snowpack is the most critical water resource in the West, banking water that is used during the dry months of the summer and fall. But what deposits there were this year disappeared before replenishing the rivers, lakes, and reservoirs.
So not only did we get less snow than we expected, but it disappeared a lot sooner. And higher temperatures means even when we get water, it's falling more as rain in the mountains rather than snow, and it's running off faster.
Firefighters say the fire season so far this year in California is around 3 months ahead, and they're not necessarily talking about the number of fires that have been burning or the number of acres. They're talking about the fuel. Everything is crunchy, from the grass to the trees. It just takes one spark to create an inferno.
We don't have the moisture helping both lead us into a wetter spring and then a wetter fall. The fuels are more available and they're burning more intensely. So once the fire develops and the intensity increases, it produces its own fire environment.
Fires that are burning so intensely, the smoke creates its own weather.
You have particles for water to condense around water droplets, and you can see wildfires create their own thunderstorms. The problem is, that water that the thunderstorm may have in it, in the form of rain, may not reach the ground. It may evaporate before it hits the ground. So everything's staying dry, but now you've got lightning. And that lightning can spark more fires.
Just a few decades ago, the fire season averaged 5 months. Now, firefighters believe the threat is year-round.
When I started years ago, our fire seasons were approximately 3 months, and you expected them to get worse into the fall, because that's your fuels have dried out the most. It's a time lag, but now we're going into early season. Fuels are available sooner to burn, and then hoping for the rains to finish it in the end. So we usually knew by October 15th or so we were shutting down. Mother Nature was taking care of it, and that's not the case anymore.
Extreme fire behavior that is costing billions of dollars to fight each year, and costing more to those who live in the path.
When you're sitting in your car by yourself and everything around you on fire, you kind of think that maybe this is it.
Butte County Supervisor Doug Teeter lost everything dating back to what his grandfather built, including nearly his life when the campfire came to Paradise in November of 2018.
Brings sadness to my eyes, thinking about that day.
85 people were killed in that fire and over 18,000 structures were destroyed. Slowly, though, time is healing this community, even though the scars clearly remain.
It's not surreal like it once was.
You're kind of more looking to the future than the past.
Yeah, but a year ago I just come up here and it was just kind of overwhelming.
This isn't the paradise it was.
We have a ways to go. We are, before the fire, we were a town of 27,000. Right now, we're a town of about 6,000. By this time next year, with the building permits in process, we should be a town of about 10,000.
Building resiliency into Paradise with stricter construction codes and fire mitigation. The mayor says his town is now the most prepared in the Sierra for wildfire, but he and many others aren't worried about what's inside the city limits.
I believe, as far as our fire went, the biggest contributing factor was the negligence of our forest management, and also the failure of our utility company to maintain their equipment.
Hurricanes, we don't really control. Earthquakes, we don't really control. Tornadoes. Fires, we could, with better land management.
More scientists are coming to the same conclusion, that past policies of fire suppression have created a backlog of burnable fuel that is compounding the effects of climate change.
We've got a debt that has accumulated from putting all these fires out over the years from fire suppression that's just built up a really heavy fuel load. With climate change, you're just drying the fuels out earlier. You have higher temperatures and lower relative humidity that really can support these fires. So it's those two things kind of interacting with each other.
Fires that historically would burn along the surface are now climbing trees into their crowns, killing those trees. And what comes back isn't a forest, but rather fields of shrubs and smaller plants.
There's a lot of reasons to hold on to the forest, but certainly one way of thinking about it is if you look at a tree, it's storing about 50 to 100 times as much carbon as a shrub field would.
Carbon is blamed for accelerating climate change that is raising temperatures and creating the conditions for the monstrous fires that are killing forests. Trees, which are the best natural way to take carbon out of the atmosphere. It's a destructive cycle that scientists say we have only one way out of: fighting fire with fire.
If we don't change the way we're approaching fire, the future is going to be more of the same, but just more intense and more difficult. And I wish I, could put a better spin on it, but it unfortunately means more homes are going to burn, more people are going to be threatened, and the fire situation is going to continue to get worse because we're not fundamentally changing either the one driver, climate change, or the other driver, which is forest management, which has been intent on putting all fires out rather than trying to work with fire.
Or California could stop constructing homes in high-risk areas, which would put even more pressure on a state with an already critical housing shortage.
Why do we keep rebuilding in New Orleans, Texas, Florida after the hurricanes? So where do you put these people? That's one thing that until you start looking at places like that and saying that about that, don't tell us we shouldn't be rebuilding here.
I mean, I look around here and I think of all the people, that I know, and I'll probably never see them again. A lot of them, they'll probably end up just moving away and doing whatever.
There are hundreds of towns in California like Paradise and Greenville that people have called home since the 1800s, founded on manifest destiny, a doctrine of unstoppable westward expansion. Now there's a belief of a whole different kind of inevitability.
I can't tell you the number of small towns I have seen where, at least to my eye, because I'm always focused on the forest and the fuel loads, I just go, oh my God, this is really a disaster waiting to happen. And there's a lot of communities like that.
Beginning with the gold rush, migration has changed the fortunes and the landscape of California at a cost that this generation is beginning to pay for.